Hi, everyone. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Although it's been that way, Colorado, for almost a damn year. Can't wait to travel again. One of these days, that world's going to open up again. And boy, it's going to be fun. Opening up. Got a lot of dApps to build on Cardano, a lot of deals to make. Man, I'm excited. This is going to be a good year, 2021. I'm very excited about this year. Last year was tough. It was tough for everybody. But you know what? Politics are over. You can tell that they really want them to still be here, but they're starting to slowly recede. The pandemic is slowly receding. People are getting back to their lives. You know, nothing is forever. Everything is finite. Best lesson I ever learned. And it's a lesson that Vitalik gave me. And thank you for that. Cardano's doing good, making progress. Decentralization metric is starting to count down again. D is going to equal 0 here in March, and then it'll be long behind us, and the hybrid Shelley phase is over, and then we're basically completely done with that part of the project. We got the Merry hard fork. I think that's coming in February, so look for that. Going to have product update at the end of the month. We're always scaling, always building. Latest person to join the IOHK family is Lunatech. They're a European software development firm. They've been around since 1993, and they're currently working on some ETC-related things, but they're domain experts in Scala. We're going to look at them for a potential candidate to work on the DevNets for Cardano as well, because right now it's a face-off between the Rust code and the Scala code for which one gets to be permanently part of the DevNets. So working on that. A lot of progress on Plutus, of course. Those guys are just so excited, and they're working so hard, and we're really excited to see all the other little things. Hybrid wallets are coming. Partial delegation is coming. We are right now working on our go-to-market strategy for the first half of this year for smart contracts and all the cool things that are floating along the way. A lot of commercial deals. People want to come to Cardano. They're begging us. They say, oh, man, Cardano is the best ever. We want to be part of that family. How do we get some of that? And it's just the beginning. So there you go. Anyway, figured I'd do an AMA. It is Sunday, January 10th, 2021. The world is on fire. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong this week, politically speaking. I've made a lot of videos, man. I was talking about the nature of free speech. I'm the least popular guy around because I'm bound to piss somebody off somewhere about that. And of course, litany of other little things. But, you got to stand by your principles even when they're inconvenient. And of course, you guys have had a lot of fun. And really cool to see what's been going on with Catalyst and voting. Fund 2 has come to a close. We'll do a post-mortem on it. I think the payments are going to go out here in a little bit. Fund 3 is opening up. Long live Fund 2. Long live Fund 3. And it's going to go like clockwork. We should get a fund every 6 to 8 weeks. And the voting experience is going to improve. We're also scaling up the set of people that we're working with on Catalyst. We're bringing some governance consultancies in. So there's some people working on DCF, some people working on Catalyst, and eventually they're going to meet in the middle. And we're going to have one of the best governance systems around, I think, for any cryptocurrency, which is far, far better than anything on market. Speaking of governance, perhaps you guys heard that a certain somebody left a certain blockchain company today. We all kind of know each other in the cryptocurrency space. People go around and build cryptocurrencies, and people have their exits and entrances. I've met Charlie Lee and Roger Ver, and I've known Dan since 2013. I've known Vitalik since 2013, and we're friends and enemies in a certain respect. We're obviously building competing protocols, but we're friends in that philosophically we're supposed to be part of the same tent. We all believe in the promise and power of cryptocurrencies, and some people have their entrances and some people have their exits. And Dan, I think, has never found a project that has quite fit him in a way where he sticks around for a long time. I've been at Cardano now for 6 years, and I cannot wait to see if we can make it another 6. And they're productive years. And, EOS, I think Dan was there for about 4. And he certainly put a lot of work into it. And it's a big community, big ecosystem. The problem is they raised too much money. And that's what ended up defining the project. Had they just upgraded BitShares or they did a much smaller offering, I think there would be a small but incredibly evangelistic group of people that were real excited about what they did. But the project is functionally defined by just having billions of dollars laying around and in assets it's not even of the project. So who cares if they get adoption or not? They're made men for the rest of time. So no matter when Dan left, if he stuck around for another 10 years, people would still call it an exit. And they'd still say EOS didn't accomplish its lofty goals. So I don't know what he's going to do next. And I know a lot of people are running around and some Schadenfreude, and I don't have any there because at the end of the day, if EOS fails, a lot of people get hurt. Just the same for XRP. And one would hope that these projects can find ways to survive and thrive, and that the people who have invested their hopes and dreams into these projects can be made whole, and they can have a good experience and they can get some value out of it. You never delight in your competitors or different ideas failing, because those failures do hurt people. And just be around to see if you can help where and when it makes sense. But it's an interesting day in that respect. I knew this was coming. Happened with Steam, happened with BitShares, and I was very surprised when EOS came out that the technology of BitShares is so close to what Dan wanted to do with EOS. Why not just hard fork it and upgrade it? Why did they need a completely new system, especially after they had achieved decentralization and they had a working treasury model? Couldn't they have used the hype cycle there just to do a kind of like a season equity offering type of thing, extended monetary supply? Never understood that. But anyway, it is what it is. The project is where it's at. Community has certainly not had kind things to say about me. And that's okay. Travelism always exists. And, we all pick on each other, but no more so than the Bitcoin maximalists pick on everyone else. And they literally call us criminals and horrible human beings and have no right to exist and haven't contributed anything. It's funny, you can spend nearly 10 years of your life in an industry building things and continue to grow things and evangelize it, and to have half of the industry basically say every single thing you've done, it means nothing. Dan Larimer, for all of his faults as a human being and our disagreements personally and professionally, he was the guy who came up with DPoS. He was the guy who came up with DAOs, along with his dad and myself. And he has made some meaningful contributions to the industry. And BitShares was probably the first algorithmic stablecoin. I'm not aware of any other project that predates it that accomplished the things that BitShares accomplished. And Steam was an interesting but flawed attempt to bring about change in the curation of content in social media. In many ways, it was ahead of its time. The flaw in all these projects has always been that they weren't opened up to external ideas. With Cardano, one of the starkest contrasts here is that I have very strong opinions about how certain things in the tech world need to be done or the science world need to be done. But you'll notice my name is never on any of the papers. Even if I contribute to them or talk around them or think about it with the scientists, they have their domain, I have my domain, and we open up a collaboration in a way that things can change. For example, with Cardano, we didn't know in 2015 if it was going to be a proof of work or a proof of stake system. We just didn't. We said, well, let's see where the science takes us. So we had a group of people working on proof of work and a group of people working on proof of stake. And I had some opinions, but I said, well, we'll just see what happens. And it turned out that we could build a great proof of stake system. And we did that with the Ouroboros agenda. What this does is it gives you the magic superpower of refreshing the idea flow. So we keep adding scientists, we keep adding new viewpoints. Some people leave, some people come in, and it makes the project so much more decentralized once you've opened it up to the academic world. Since we started this company, we've written 92 papers now. 92, imagine that. And a lot have gone through the peer review process. I think we've generated well more than 10,000 citations, probably 20 at this point. I'd have to add them all up. And as a consequence, that corpus of knowledge is part of the commons. It belongs to everyone. It's Cardano's gift to the entire cryptocurrency space. And the people who keep adding to that corpus of knowledge, some are tenured professors, made men and women in the academic world. Some are postdocs, people wanting to be made men. Some are graduate students, but they're mostly faceless in that they come and they go, and they come and they go. And there's a process to add them and remove them. And that's one of the superpowers of Cardano, is this innovation engine that is not reliant upon a founder, and also an admission that we haven't solved every problem. There's still huge problems to think about in the world of scalability, huge problems to think about in the world of governance, huge problems to think about in the world of interoperability, and so forth. And each and every one of those collections of problems, we've had a good head start, or we've made some meaningful contribution, but we are humble enough to acknowledge that we didn't solve it. My great umbrage with the EOS project has always been this concept that gods living up on Olympus have solved everything, and they know the future. And all you have to do is just invest in them, and that they will somehow, some way, to give you that future. And what happens when they leave? What happens when they get it wrong? And what mechanism tells you that they got it wrong? The claims that they made are not there. We have the peer review process as our independent check and balance. We have security audits as an independent check and balance. There's a dozen or more of these things. The fact that we collaborate with more than 10 software companies to write code means that we have to explain how the code we've written works to them. And then they have to be able to add to that code. So what that does is it keeps us all accountable to what we claim is true. And I think that's the only way to go forward and avoid these projects from descending into a cult of personality. So while it's a short-term harm to EOS, I think the departure of Larimer is actually going to end up helping the project, because it's going to force them to be a bit more open to new ideas and different ideas. They won't be so reliant on one particular philosophy for engineering and science. And perhaps they will use this as an example to work with others in ways they haven't worked with them before. They have so much money that they literally can buy whatever they want, just not credibility. Can't buy that. There's no price tag on it. Okay, let's get to your questions. Why you don't publish your technical content on official Cardano channel? We publish it all the time. It's on the IWK website. It's obviously in the forums, Telegram. It's on the GitHub repositories. Everything is open source. Everything is open to external review. There are no patents. There's no intellectual property. It's all open source licenses, Creative Commons. So they're all available for publication. So yeah, and I think Cardano.org also has a litany of information, and there's also the documentation. So that's just simply not true to say we don't publish your technical content on the official Cardano channel. Who is the smartest cryptographer you've known? In terms of just raw ability and horizontal breadth, I'd say probably Dan Bonnet. He's an extremely bright guy, and he just understands everything. And there's an elegance and simplicity, but profoundness in the writing that Dan has that I think is extremely powerful. In terms of impact on the industry as a whole, or cryptography as a whole, I'd say Silvio Macaulay and Adi Shamir tie for that. I was actually on a panel with both of them. They invented like half the stuff that we use, and they still publish, and their minds are incredibly sharp. In terms of the best scientific administrator who is both capable of making great contributions and then at the same time is capable of leading scientists in a very humble, productive way, which actually I think is the hardest and highest art of science, is our chief scientist, Aglos. It is not easy to deal with other people's egos, and it's not easy to mold and sculpt young minds and have enough patience to allow them to grow into productive older minds. As you watch arrogant graduate students who think they're hot shit, you somehow have to make them proper academics and get them set up so that they can have real careers and care enough that the outcome is there. It's difficult to be a great researcher, a great administrator, a great educator, and also survive in university politics. And I haven't met anybody in my career who's better at that than Agalos is. And you can just see it. His former student, Bin Chang, for example, has now gone off and has his own academic career, but we collaborate with him and he designed the entire Catalyst treasury system. Another one of his former students, Dionysius Zindros, invented the foundations of sidechains for proof of work, the whole Nipapaus concept. Another one of his great students, Han Chang, is now floating around the American academic circles and has written a lot of great papers. So what's so cool is to see his students have become great in their own right. And it's so hard to do that as a great academic. We look, for example, to Einstein and we say, oh, he's such a brilliant physicist. And of course he was one of the greatest in human history. But you look at the pedigree and you say, well, which one of his students has really gone on to do incredible things? And you compare and contrast that to other titans in the 20th century. And you realize that in that particular department wasn't as great as himself. And so I tend to judge the holism about all of that. And I think that Agalos has really achieved that balance. And actually, I think his work is going to, in the long term, be just as meaningful as Silvio and Adi Shamir's work, because in essence, he really did solve the proof of stake problem. And should this work out on an industrial scale, it's going to run an economy of billions of people. And he invited an interdisciplinary approach. The group has economists, it has game theorists, it has programming language experts. It's very uncommon to see that. Usually you have a narrow scope, a narrow silo, and you optimize with that in that to get academic brownie points. To invite interdisciplinary papers is an academic risk. And to be able to pull it off, it means you make far more meaningful research, which ultimately changes things. Will decentralized exchanges kill centralized exchanges? I think in the next 10 or 20 years, that's definitely a possibility. You know, it's a better business model. It's more aligned with how crypto assets work. You don't need a trusted third-party custodian. The problem is there's just front-running, efficiency, fees, market depth, and liquidity. So, you know, a lot of problems there. And so it's really, really hard to get a decentralized exchange working on tandem with centralized exchange. But to be honest, decentralized exchanges have made enormous progress in the last 5 years. When I started, it was a pipe dream, but now it feels like an inevitability. Charles, Tesla Roadster or a Cybertruck? Well, I want to see the new Tesla Roadster. I haven't seen it. Love fast cars, but it's going to be an interesting thing. I think you can take the roof off. I'm really sad it's not a convertible. You know, if you like supercars, this is the worst time ever, I think, in the industry to buy one because all of the prior supercars are going to be about half the speed of the battery supercars, but the battery supercars aren't going to hit market until 2024. So you look at something like, oh, here's a Lamborghini Aventador. Wow, that's so incredible. And then you have this new stuff that's coming up that's going to do 0 to 60 in 1.8, 1.7 seconds. And it's like 1,200, 1,400 horsepower. Just like, wow, that's so crazy. So it's going to be really fun to see what the Sion does and all of these things, especially as they go into production. Usually what Lamborghini, for example, does is they'll do something like a super expensive low volume Lamborghini, and then they do a mass market one. So for example, the Revuton preceded the Aventador, but the Aventador styling and design was very similar to what the Revuton introduced. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that does. The Roadster is obviously going to change the supercar entire market. we kind of got a sample of what that could look like with the Porsche 918. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to make my Huracan look like a toy. Just sad. Still pretty, though. Africa special. Haven't announced it yet. Waiting, but we will. We might have something good at the end of the month, though. I don't know. Unrelated to the Africa special, but something else that I think you guys would like. We'll see. I'm a skeptical panda. People keep promising me things at certain dates, and they don't happen. You know, welcome to this industry. The Koenigsegg, those Scandinavian engineers. I'm Norwegian, for God's sakes, quarter Norwegian, and I still pick on them. Yeah, they make incredible cars too. Overpriced, though. What's in your pockets? Markers. Why? These aren't markers. These are Lamy pens. It's my favorite pen. They write incredibly well. They handle cursive very well, and they're also quite nice for mathematical symbols. And so I developed a taste for them over 10 years ago, and I've tried to keep them close to me, although there was a time when I couldn't afford them. Very perceptive. That is a Waterhouse. As a man of science, if I get my head frozen upon death, any chance I can actually come back? Well, hypothetically, yes. Odds are no. I think you probably have a much better bet of cloning yourself and then just imprinting a simulacrum with enough information about who you are that the clone can get a close approximation. There's probably a better chance of that. Consciousness transfer, who knows? We'll have to understand what consciousness is all about. What was the purpose of Next Cryptography? You guys dug in there, huh? Next Cryptography was a company that I founded right after I left BitShares, and it was going to be the next organization I worked on. But then I ended up getting roped into Ethereum, and I never ended up using that corporate shell. And of course, we did something different with IOHK because it was a Hong Kong company when we founded it after Ethereum. Have you read Neuromancer? Yes, good book. What do you think of the Pagani design? Too expensive and not enough bang for your buck. I mean, honestly, the mid-engine Corvettes, they're like under $100,000, and they can give a Huracan a run for its money. Supercars ain't what they used to be. They're just penis extensions now. RNG, random number generator. Your view, please. A number generation? Random number generation? That's like a whole field of cryptography. What about it? Be more specific in your question. That's like asking, what's your view on fields or groups or rings? It's like, okay, well, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. Talk about Galois theory if you want. Be an American, get a Dodge Viper, and then have a Dodge Viper that needs to be repaired, and then have a Dodge Viper in the shop. They're terrible cars, Dodge Vipers, terrible. Is the market crashing right now? What's going on? We have a newbie, somebody who's never been in crypto before. Welcome to crypto. Pull up a chair. Goes way up, goes way down. That's what crypto does. It's very volatile. YubiKey support coming. It is definitely in the plans. We just got to accelerate what we're doing with Daedalus. I would strongly advocate getting it out sooner rather than later, but it certainly is taking some time. But we'll get there. Okay, well, I'll just use my mouse. Just died for some damn reason. What is the goal of cryptography? Cryptography is really the science and art of secure communication. When we want to communicate with each other, we have a lot of features of communication that matter. So you think about CINA, you think about confidentiality, you think about integrity of information, you think about a repudiation or non-repudiation. You have to authenticate information, these types of things. So for example, when I say I signed the contract, well, how do you know somebody didn't replace the contract with another contract? For example, a will. I give all my money to Jane, but then you switch the will. I give all my money to Bill. Well, how do you know that the Jane one was authentic over the Bill one, right? Well, that's the point of the field of cryptography. You can hash the contract, and then you have a digital signature. So you have an authentication mechanism for that information, and then the digital signature allows you to validate that that was indeed the will of the person. And maybe you want to keep it secret until a particular period of time. Okay, well, that's what encryption's about, right? Timed encryption. You say, okay, we're not going to reveal that secret decryption key to see what was in the will until after I'm dead or after this date or something like that, after the children turn 21. Okay, for example, you could imagine a government for transparency has a automatic escape valve to declassify all of its data on a certain date with a dead man switch. That's the point of cryptography. And the goal is just basically to give you a toolbox that you are able to achieve your privacy goals, your availability goals, your integrity goals, your authentication goals, given an adversary. So an adversary is someone who's trying to get early access, corrupt the file, trying to change the signature, change reality, learn your secrets, whatever that might be. What a cryptographer does is the hypothetical, metaphysical adversary, they give them certain capabilities and models. So they say, oh, okay, they can do a chosen plain text attack or chosen ciphertext attack or this attack or that attack. And with these capabilities, they build a model that shows whatever they're thinking of is secure. So for example, we'd say, oh, okay, modern cryptography is secure in the classical sense. However, if you introduce an adversary with a quantum computer, perhaps this breaks some forms of crypto. There you go. And so that's what cryptography is all about. So it's you always start with a goal, you have a use, and then you have an adversary, and then you kind of try to prove around what you can and cannot do. And you look for impossibility theorems, and you look for clever constructions and hard problems, and it's deeply connected to mathematics because a lot of cryptography involves asymmetries where something is easy to prove but extremely hard to discover. So for example, public key crypto relies on you having a trap door that's your secret key, something that you know that's connected to a public piece of information, and it only goes one way. You can go from the private to the public, but not the public to the private. And so you look at like factoring of integers. That's an example of a secret key. It was one of the earliest ones to discover where, integers can be uniquely decomposed into prime multiples. And it's called the fundamental theorem of arithmetic. And so 15, for example, is 5 times 3. There you go. We like uniqueness in number theory. So that's one of the reasons why we decided not to make 1 a prime number. Of course, we'd always have to say excluding 1, right? You lose uniqueness because you have infinite chains of 1s there. So unique decomposition of integers, well, it goes easy one way. If you take 3 times 5, easy to get to 15. It's computationally very slow to go the other way, to take 15 and break it down to 3 times 5. If you don't believe me, Tell me what is the integer factorization of 2 to the 1732nd power minus 1. There you go. You go ahead and tell me that. Take a little bit of time, surprisingly long time. But if you happen to have the factorization, you could quickly multiply them together and prove that it's there. So you use something called the Euler-Tolsche function, and then suddenly you can start constructing this elaborate series of key pairs where you have a secret and the adversary does not. And then as a consequence, you can encrypt things and decrypt things based upon what you know, what you share. So these mathematical constructions and the proof that things are hard, that's really the tools of cryptography, along with how to build proofs and do analysis. And what's so cool about it is a very interdisciplinary field. So these mathematical tools can come from any field of mathematics. For example, we have an emerging field of cryptography called lattice-based cryptography. And it's basically using different mathematical primitives than what we use in RSA or the discrete log problem or these types of things. But it's very useful for post-quantum crypto. And it uses a fundamentally different type of math, and much harder math, but more elegant, and it gives you more tools as a result. So it's very special in that respect. Now, closely related cousin to cryptography is information security. And what IS does is it broadens the context to how you're actually going to use it. So cryptography is more about arbitrary, abstract adversaries in certain models, and it proves capabilities within those models. Information security is about real life. So setting those models aside, what happens when we take this stuff and we actually deploy it in person? And there you have social engineering. There you have a situation where the crypto system can do everything right, but you can still fail because the skeleton keys that you give to your employees, they can be manipulated into handing them to an attacker. For example, the recent Twitter hack that happened, where they got Bill Gates's account and Obama's account and Biden's account. That was because a social engineering event convinced Twitter employees to hand over key credentials to outsiders. So the crypto was working well, the security system was working well. It's just the backdoors they put in for remote access for their employees were shared with unauthorized people. And information security worries about that stuff, and they do a phenomenal job with it. Hi, Charles. Thoughts on Cypherpunk 2077? It's funny. I own a game company, and one of these days we'll actually make games. And so you guys can ask me about video games. I can tell you everything about them. I have not played this particular video game, but I've heard interesting things. I think they shipped it a little too early. The sad thing is that there is a incentive now in the video game industry to not have a complete product before you actually ship it to the customer. So they do these early release games or very, very, very buggy games. When I was a kid, there was no internet, consumer internet, so you couldn't ship a patch. So the only way you could improve your software after you shipped it was that you'd have to ship a floppy disk to the person with the patch. And that was really expensive. So more often than not, they worked a lot at trying to make video games work well, although sometimes they failed. Like I remember getting Daggerfall, Elder Scrolls 2, and that game just never worked. Never damn worked. It was impossible. There were so many bugs in it, and I never had a chance to really get into it and play it. So I had to wait until Morrowind before I became an Elder Scrolls fan. So I hear through the grapevine that 2077 has issues, and I also hear through the grapevine that the world design and feature set is less enthralling than Grand Theft Auto 5, and they're similar games in terms of that open world dynamic. No comments on the plot or anything yet. So, I'll wait a year or two, and when they get it all out, play it later on. And usually I don't have time to play. What I end up doing is I just read summaries and watch the cutscenes on YouTube while flying. How about that? Charles, you played WoW ever? No. The last MMORPG of that sort I played was EverQuest. One of the greatest games ever made. Your thoughts on Red Dead Redemption 2? I mean, they literally gave your character tuberculosis and had him die like 3/4 of the way through the game. Come on. That's as ballsy as it gets. Is the Gogan upgrade still in time for Q1? Yeah, the next Gogan fork is happening in, I believe, tentatively for February, but that date looks pretty good. And that's going to add native multi-asset support. So we've been running it on the test nets, and now we're rolling it over. And that also adds the infrastructure for the extended UTXO model. And then the final HFC event will add full Plutus support. So as we mentioned, it was 3 upgrades. The first was the Allegra hard fork, which was done in December, followed by the Mary, which is native multi-asset, and then finishing it off with Plutus Core. What U.S. state is the best to move to if you're on a budget? Well, that depends on your job and what you do. You know, you can live quite well even in socialist hellholes like California if you're, a movie producer. If you like famous director or something like that. It comes down to where you make your money, how much you travel, and so forth. Like I can live anywhere. But there's a reason I don't live in Wyoming at the moment, is that it would be logistically so difficult to travel 250 days a year and live so far away from modern infrastructure. I'd be adding, every time I wanted to go home, like 8 hours of commuting, 16 hours, 8 hours one way, 8 hours the other way, and like 16 hours, it would be just too much. What makes Cardano uniquely resistant to quantum computers as opposed to these rest of these projects like Bitcoin and Ethereum? And we're not. There you go. Shortest answer of the day. Would you beat Vitalik Buterin in a boxing match? Come on, guys. Really? You even have to ask that? Yeah, if Neuralink is proven successful, would you get it implanted? 100%. What are your thoughts on Julian Assange? I've never met the man or interacted with him. Some people in cryptocurrency space have. Like Snowden, Assange is an interesting fellow because there's a blend of things, and some are quite productive and some are counterproductive. So on one hand, Assange really does feel that there needs to be transparency and openness in countries, and he fights a lot for that. And he created WikiLeaks and all these other efforts. And the point of these things is called truth to power. Okay. On the other hand, there's embedded within him a degree of ego about the process and the approach. And he really wants to be the guy who did the leak. He really wants to be the guy who's calling truth to power. So his identity is caught up in a way with this rage against the machine. I'm against the man, and so forth. So an interesting thought experiment, person like Assange or Snowden, is would they have done what they did if there was a magic button they could have pushed and always been anonymous? So somehow technology evolved to the point where they could basically run the operations, the leaks and these things without revealing their identity. And people would still believe that the leaks are credible and so forth. Would they do it? And I don't know. I don't have the answer. But I think that tells you a lot about them as people. Could they pull a Satoshi or not? Do I think they're beneficial to society? Yeah, I think you do need people like that. Any preference in COVID vaccine? If so, why? Well, both my dad and brother got the Pfizer vaccine. They're doing just fine. So given that I share a lot of genetics with them, probably not going to have any issues myself. That second shot is tough, really, really tough. The Novavax vaccine actually is the one I've always been holding out for if they can ever get the damn clinical trial done. The protein subunit model that they have is likely to create a strong immune response, but I mean, it's the safest, I'd say, just from analogy to other vaccine platforms historically. But that said, the mRNA ones are looking great. It's just they're a bit high on the side effect profile. I am curious to see the single shot platform from Johnson & Johnson. We'll have safety and efficacy data for that at the end of this month, likely, and they'll unblind it. We'll see. There were some cases of transverse myelitis with the study, which is why they put it on hold, but it's unclear if that was in the placebo or in the vaccine group. So Novavax is, I think, the best, hypothetically, depending on safety and efficacy data. Yeah, I think any of them will probably be fine. I'm a little skeptical on these adenovirus ones. It's like the whole idea of a genetically engineered chimpanzee virus carrying viral DNA that interacts with my genome to make the RNA, to make the spike proteins is it's a bit much. You know, I kind of understand how it works. And so I'm like, okay, I get it. But I'm like, man, it'd be a lot better if you can just inject me with the spike proteins directly. And then we kind of avoid all that molecular machinery, and we just get to the business of creating an immune response. But who knows? Thoughts on Brexit, Charles Hoskinson? Tough time, right? I guess it's complete. By the way, the UK got the vaccine almost 2 months before the European Union did. So it shows you that having sovereignty can sometimes help you. I don't know. We'll see whether it ends up being a good decision or a bad decision. The media has clearly made up its mind, but really you only know these things about 5-10 years down the road, and independence is just that. It's what you make of it. People would be asking us, what about Brexit America? It's like, oh, well, the jury was out. It took us a little while after 1776 to see if the experiment was going to work or not. What happens when BTC is fully mined? Hypothetically, transaction fees will cover the security of the system. Any time frame for the network stack of Cardano be integrated? Well, we already have the network stack. It's already done. You're talking probably about the peer-to-peer components. The governor is there, and they're profiling it on the testnet now. It looks like tentatively it should all be turned on before the end of March. I'd like to see it in tandem with D equals 0. There's really not a huge demand for it. And it's one of those things that because there's not a demand, the network teams had the luxury of doing things. And they've learned an enormous amount since July of last year, because we've had a lot of advanced logging features and we were able to confirm things that were in the simulations. But peer-to-peer should get in this quarter. I was a little disappointed we didn't get it in the last quarter, but it's one of the smallest teams. There's only a few people working on the network team, and they had to kind of prioritize simulations and profiles and technical debt reduction. The big thing was the peer-to-peer governor and that piece of infrastructure to run peer-to-peer. That's actually already in the code base. And so it's just a matter of turning it on, parameterizing it correctly, profiling it correctly, and tuning it. And so they're being very cautious about it because it's a live network. And it's one of those things when you turn it on, it doesn't really change things in terms of user experience. But if you get it wrong, it can cause all kinds of chicanery and havoc and network splits and these things. And given that we have a lot of stuff going on right now, we want to kind of limit the amount of change to one big thing. So it was first Shelley and got all the infrastructure in. Then we had to get Allegra in, which was our first post-Shelley hard fork combinator event. And somewhere in the merry age is when peer-to-peer will come, right when D is heading towards 0. But they'll both be closed out before the end of the quarter. What's the best way to retain knowledge? Memory Palace. Your thoughts on grass-fed versus grain-fed beef. I wouldn't be a damn rancher if I supported grain-fed, sir. But I actually am not a rancher. I grow hay. That's pretty much it. I got a bunch of animals, but I could never slaughter them. Grass-fed. I already answered this question, Dynamic. Stop asking. Charles, update us about Cardano and Litecoin collaboration. We are going to write a lip. Is that a ring from a secret society? No. Not at all. Not at all. See you guys in Jackson Hole. Are you going to give Dan Larimer a job? He probably has more money than me. Raised $4 billion. Who the fuck knows? No, Danny Boy's just fine. Living out there in Virginia. Is growing hay for tax purposes? No, horses eat and eat and eat and eat. So if you have horses, you either have to buy to feed them or you can grow your own food to feed them. So I grow hay to feed my horses. And somehow it saves me lots of money. I also sell some of the hay too. Have a deal with the neighbor. He runs a hay business. Vatican. Well, I was baptized Catholic. Thoughts on the psychedelics renaissance that's occurring? I highly encourage everybody to read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, and then listen to his interview on the Joe Rogan Experience. Highly, highly recommend it. Give you guys a lot of context on the history and where we're at and where we're going. But I do believe we'll see broad-scale legalization of psychedelics in the next 20 years. So that's extremely exciting. It's going to change society at a very fundamental level. Charles, what's the status of the ITN? It's over. It's done. It's probably still running somewhere, but it's a vestigial little artifact. There's no use or need for it anymore. It's gone. It was there to help us bootstrap Shelley, and Shelley's here. The ITN has become Cardano. Will you publish Japan trip? Yes. When we have dates for it, as we're getting close to DCF, I'm going to go, of course, publish all the dates publicly, the locations I'm going to be, and we'll do a big help desk tour for Japanese users, and we'll do a lot of stuff. There's tons of little things I think are going to be a lot of fun. We'll work with Sebastian on it. He's running a Cardano hub in Japan, and all of the meetups will be televised. I'll have them recorded, and we'll post them on YouTube, either live or pre-recorded. But it'll be a lot of fun, and I'll start in Hokkaido and go all the way down to Okinawa, and we'll have a lot of fun with it. What's the point of Elon always promoting Dogecoin? He is basically mocking our industry for fun, because that's his personality type and what he likes doing. He has a very dry, bizarre sense of humor. It's very South African, and it's fun and it's exciting. It kind of brings people in, but he's a unique guy. He's always been a unique guy, and I don't think it's anything personal. And it's not. I think he's a great fan of Dogecoin. It's just it's a tongue-in-cheek way when you're an outsider to be part of the crypto madness without having to be part of it. How's KVM testing progressing? Quite well. We'll start broadcasting reports on it. I'd like to rope them into the smart contract report, and we'll make sure we get that out this month for you guys. Are there use cases where proof of work is better than proof of stake? Currently, bootstrapping from Genesis until we deploy Ouroboros Genesis is significantly better. In fact, it's unique versus proof of stake, so you don't need a checkpoint. That's a huge advantage. And also the whole NIPAPOW infrastructure, that's a huge advantage. And if your desire is to aggregate a lot of computation capabilities, especially with ASIC resistance, then you're basically building a giant supercomputer with proof of work. You're not doing that with proof of stake. Fortunately, the protocols are not advanced enough to be able to take advantage of that supercomputer you're constructing. So there are definite advantages to proof of work from a certain viewpoint, but I don't think that's no longer, I no longer believe it's a security viewpoint that proof of stake provides value. Proof of work provides value. Proof of stake, in my view, is better. It's much easier to quantify the security. And in practice, I think the systems are far more secure. How do you feel about DOT using their own modified version of Ouroboros? It's great. Very exciting that DOT is doing their thing. The more the merrier. That's the beautiful part about when you build these systems, you write these papers, other people can take them, modify them, and deploy systems. It makes me very happy because if we're using similar standards, it means, for example, when they do a sidechains protocol, it's probably going to work with mine. So it's actually quite good that one of our largest competitors is technologically similar to us in certain respects. And it's not called theft, Jason. Not at all. It's actually an open source ethos. You take and you give. You always have to contribute. That's what makes the world a better place. And it's not just words that you flap around. It's a lifestyle. If either you're open source or you're not. So if people take something and modify it and go and do their own thing, and even to compete with you, you still have to accept that and think it's a good thing. And you end up getting so much more when people are working in that way. Do you meditate? Yes, I do. I use the Calm app, and I also use Amuse, and they do different things. And I think meditation is incredibly important. Since I did it, I got a lot better as a person. Oh, that wasn't the question I wanted. Damn thing moved on me. It was, here we go. When do you think fossil fuels will be too expensive to use? My ex-girlfriend's dad actually had an oil company, and I learned a lot about the oil and gas business. It was an E&P firm, exploration and production. And it was a pretty crazy time, very early in my life. Oil and fossil fuels in general, it's not a question about expensive. It's a question about alternatives. And so there was this game that the oil companies played for a long time where they said, look, fossil fuels eventually are going to be old stuff, and then we're going to move to a new energy for motility. And, you know, backbone, it's going to run on fossil fuels until nuclear wakes up or something like that. Okay, so what is that energy of motility? They wanted hydrogen fuel cells. Why? Because you can make hydrogen with natural gas, and you can make hydrogen with the petrochemical industry. So it's really low cost to do that. And what's your supply chain look like? It looks exactly like oil. You have a gas station, you have a hydrogen station, you deliver it, you pump it, you can reuse the pipelines, these types of things. So it made a lot of sense to them, and they built all these fuel cells and had all these patents, and they were just kind of waiting for the conversion. And they said, maybe 2030, 2035 is when we'll actually start pushing for it. And they did anticipate battery-powered cars becoming a big thing. The mobile computing revolution is what front ran that. So what happened was that all these cell phones and these tablets and these laptops came in, they got really big, and they forced massive evolution in battery technology, much faster than the growth curve that was anticipated. So as a consequence, everybody wanted batteries with higher energy density, lighter, charge faster, last longer, and cheaper materials. Okay. And those evolutionary factors, by the billions of cell phones made and laptops made and tablets made, basically took the industry, put it on steroids, and gave it an R&D budget that the oil companies didn't anticipate. That was necessary, but not sufficient to displace the hydrogen plant. The sufficient part was Tesla's rise. This company that came out of nowhere, that's now worth more than Toyota and Ford and GM combined, basically has said battery-powered cars are the thing. And so when you say, okay, well, this technology only needs about one more doubling before it's completely mainstream, and then another doubling before it completely destroys the internal combustion engine. Why? Because when you get to a point where you have a 1,000 to 2,000 mile range on a consumer battery car, and the batteries cost 25% of what they cost today and charge in half the time, once you reach that point, you have no range fatigue because it's longer than you could realistically drive in a day. You can charge it to full overnight. There'll be a huge charging infrastructure. And because you don't have to have an engine or any of these other things in the car, you've massively simplified the design of the car. And the single most expensive component, the battery, is now a fraction of the cost. So when you look at the economic curves, it's almost like the vacuum tube to the transistor. The vacuum tube for a while was better, but we saw the growth rate of the transistor and we said, it's no competition. You kind of peaked on one technology and the other technology is growing exponentially. So battery powered cars are here to stay. And unfortunately for the oil companies, they've completely upended the economics of that industry, because the reality is that you're now getting backbone power instead of power generated at the site of the car. Okay, so you can make that from solar. I'm putting in over 250 kilowatts of solar panels in my farm. So I'll have well more enough energy to do whatever the hell I want to do. So if I had battery powered cars, all of them I could charge myself, never have to pay for another tank of gas the rest of my life. And a lot of Americans are moving in that direction. So it's tough times for that industry. I know, of course, they can still make money from plastics. There's still going to be a demand for fossil fuels. You can make thousands of things from distillates, not just energy for cars. So it's not going to go away. You know, the coal industry hasn't gone away. It's, you know, there's always something you can do. It's just, it won't have the same prominence and death hold. Like I remember I was in university in 2008 when oil was 140 some bucks a barrel. And, you know, we had people who were EMTs getting sick because when they went to a person's home, they like found them passed out in their garage because people were trying to make their own biodiesel and they poisoned themselves. You know, it was actually very common in Denver because gasoline was so expensive. People were looking for alternatives, even if those alternatives were counterproductive and people didn't know how to run a bioreactor. So it's gonna change. That said, as it's still going to be an industry, people are still going to be petroleum engineers. There's still stuff to do, but the cat's out of the bag, and they waited too long. Had they pushed more aggressively for hydrogen, right now battery powered cars would not be there, and we'd have all these hydrogen fuel cells and the convenience of being able to pump it into your car instead of waiting for the charge would allow that infrastructure to push out, and they could have extended their life cycle a lot longer. That's what happens when you get greedy. You know, short-term avarice can destroy your long-term market advantage. What is your favorite rapper? You know, after you buy a Lamborghini, you just get this whole catalog, right? Right now it's Rick Ross. I'm always hustling. From Gareth Hall, if you had to restart Cardano all over again, what would you do differently? One of those post-mortem questions, right? We obviously would have avoided enormity of all the mistakes for the engineering side of things. There was just so many false starts, like when you have to rewrite code sometimes 3 different times. that's something obviously you would avoid because you have all that hindsight that's there. We probably wouldn't have changed too much in the research agenda. There were a few things we could have accelerated and some false paths that we went down that we would have avoided. I would have launched a product like Yoroi long before launching Daedalus, and we would have had a command line only full node. We'd have less full nodes in the ecosystem, but we'd have a much, much, much richer wallet experience. And we could have had a huge amount of feature development that we didn't have. I would have also launched Prism much earlier in the project history, and it would be far more evolved, and we could have much tighter coupling of identity with the wallets, and that would have given us a big regulatory advantage. I probably would have started the Yella KVM project a year earlier, and it would be much more mature. And I don't know, maybe we would have had Plutus bake in the lab a little longer and just gotten Idris as one of the compiled languages to Yella, right? All the semantics for that. And then allowed people to write high assurance smart contracts through that approach instead of going for the whole banana with extended UTXO and so forth. And just had the chimeric ledger idea. In terms of the base programming language, there was a strong argument made to have written Cardano in its first generation in Scala. And had Scala 3 existed, I probably would have done that. Same for F#5, because those have evolved to a point that they've absorbed a lot of the original Haskell advantages. But, in 2015, it was a different world. And, there were assumptions we made about how easy and how hard it was to do things respectively. And some things we thought were going to be super hard ended up being somewhat simple. And some of the things we thought were going to be really easy ended up being super hard, like the hard fork combinator, for example. But on the other hand, look at where we're at and look how much success the project has had and how far along we've gone on the vision. And honestly, we're moving faster and faster, and we've gotten over those growing pains. So, our critics seem to think that we're just frozen in mud and nothing changes and we learn nothing. But I think the people who are giving us a fair shake realize that we really do have the wind at our backs and we're gaining momentum. So I'm very happy, all things considered. It's just, there's a lot of things I wish I could have gotten a do-over with. And, in future projects, we'll learn those lessons. Like molten salt reactors or some other nuclear alternative as well. Really, really like TerraPower. Traveling wave reactors are great. Take uranium-238 and you just breed it to plutonium-239 and you create a little reaction and it burns like a candle. And it's a constant reaction and it starts at the top, burns at the bottom, lasts about 30 years, 40 years until you exhaust the fuel. And you have a fast half-life, high degree of radiation for a little while. You dispose of the entire core, and within half a century, it's no longer radioactive. Much, 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 much better than any of these third or second generation nuclear power plants. Traveling wave reactors are definitely the way to go if you can get them there. And there's no proliferation concern because the plutonium is consumed with the reaction as it's converted. So you can't take it out like a normal breeder reactor. The other thing is that 238 is a waste uranium. So you probably could process a lot of the waste uranium that's floating around. But there needs to be a lot of regulatory changes to permit that because breeder reactors, understandably so, are technically not promoted because of proliferation. There's tight control in the world over certain nuclear technologies. Thorium reactors are also really, really cool. And, of course, there are other things like those modular pebble bed reactors. There's been some great designs there. And it's real cool to see how they've been able to grow. But ultimately, I think that laser fusion, like the laser inertial fusion engine, has the most promise for nuclear fission, not fusion, mostly because of the hybrid reactor designs they have. It's called, the Life is the name of it. So that's cool stuff. Ed Moses runs that program. He's a damn good marketer. Well, this is an AMA. So what's your spirit animal? Well, Kevin, my spirit animal is the capybara. They get along with everybody. Google capybara crocodile, and you'll see what I mean. They just sit there hanging around with crocodiles and caimans, and they don't get eaten. You tell me. What do you think of Algorand? Good project. What are you drinking tonight? Coffee, black. Charles, please explain how Cardano is 100x more decentralized than Bitcoin or others. How is this calculated? By those who produce blocks. So if you have 100 times the unique entities producing blocks, then we say it's 100 times more decentralized. But there are many measurements of decentralization. You can look at network propagation, so how many full nodes you have. You can look at the amount of unique development entities that are responsible for it. You can look at the funding sources and see how many unique funding sources are there. You can see at the totality of the user count. You can see it by the total amount of applications on the system. But usually when we say decentralization, we strictly mean the amount of nodes participating in the consensus process and how many unique people are making blocks. And in the case of Bitcoin, 3 to 5 usually make the same blocks again and again and again. And we consistently have 300 to 500 stake pools consistently making blocks that are unique. There's more than 1,200 registered. So I feel very comfortable in the 100x statement. But, reasonable people can have different definitions. There's no consensus in the industry of what decentralization is. AMA question, are you doing another dry year? Probably not, although I haven't drank anything since the year started. But maybe I will. I don't know. I haven't completely committed to it, but I might. What gives Cardano intrinsic value? The same thing that gives Bitcoin intrinsic value. You, the user, while the tokens can always be increased. For example, with Bitcoin, a hard fork can double the amount of tokens. What cannot be doubled are the users and the utility of the system. This is what Peter Schiff and all these other guys miss. At any time, I click a button, and actually when I was learning about Bitcoin, I did do this. I forked the code base and launched a private version of Bitcoin just to test the code and understand how things worked. So technically, I had Bitcoin Charles edition, but those tokens were worthless because it had a population of 1. And when Bitcoin had a population of 1, it was worthless. And people are finite. And people come with special skills, abilities, their own ability to work. They're adding value. So there's an intrinsic value when you have a network of people. And based upon what they can do with that network and how they can use that network is how much value you can extract. And that's what gives Cardano intrinsic value. The hundreds of thousands of people who use it, the 1,200 stake pool operators, the 10 plus entities that develop on it, and there's soon to be hundreds more that are coming. Have you done a water fast before? Yes, do them all the time. One every quarter. Longest one I ever did was 2 weeks. Charles, has anyone ever told you that your voice is really soothing? The only time I've ever heard anything about my voice, somebody who didn't like me very much, he said, Charles, anybody ever tell you you have a face for radio and a voice for silent movies? And that was so slyly done that it kind of stuck with me. Yes, I am left-handed. Will you run for president? No. I have no desire to be the president of the United States. It's the worst job in the US, and you actually can't change anything anymore. It's just a figurehead. Still Rogan after Gogan? Will you smoke weed with him? Yeah, of course Rogan after Gogan. And we'll just have to cross that road when we come to it. I think weed is not legal in Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's tobacco that they're smoking. Tobacco. Do you think Jack Ma is safe right now? I think Jack Ma's hologram is safe right now. I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, who would want to be a billionaire in China? You're the wealthiest, most powerful billionaire in the country, and you run afoul of the CCP, and then suddenly no one's seen you since October. It's not worth it. Freedom is the most important thing. From Vivek, whiteboard application. I use the Microsoft whiteboard application that comes with the Microsoft Surface. I'm on a Surface Studio for this device, but it comes free with Windows 10, and it's easy to use. Do you use Signal? Yes, both the protocol and the app. Do you think China controls Bitcoin and Ethereum? No. What's the downside of being so well known in this space or outside of this space? People have already made up their opinion about me. That's the problem. You know, there's so many things that we could do and build and collaborations we could have. And if people were giving people a fair shake, it would be easy. And unfortunately, we live in an age where people pick sides. Either they love me or they hate me, but I'm a very polarizing guy. They think I'm incredibly narcissistic, egotistical. My critics say I do nothing. I don't work. I don't know how to program. I'm incompetent. I have no technical skills. I can't lead. I'm too difficult to work with. Leave every project that I belong to. You just name it, they say it. And of course, none of it's true, but they say it and they believe it. So if you believe these things, would you want to work with that guy? No. Would you want your community to associate with that guy? No. So I think that's the worst part. The biggest downside is notoriety breeds opinion, and opinion does not require validation by reality. So you just deal with it, you know, and you work on it. And all I can do is just wake up day to day and do what I do. And actually, this is a related question right here. Do you go to /biz? So I have a web scraper, and the web scraper every day pulls up a bunch of keywords like Cardano, IOHK, my name, several of the names of my executives, and other search terms. And it gives me this lovely little report. It prints out as a PDF, and I kind of scroll through it and see, and it's usually quite long. And, you know, I search through, it may take 5 minutes or something like that, but it's nice. You know, you get one little report every day, and you kind of get to know what's going on. And it picks up 4chan, and the 4chan people, they say really, really, really nasty things time and again. I'm apparently Cardano is a tranny coin. I'm a soy boy. I'm going to jail, you know, and all this stuff. And you just wonder to yourself, what compels a person to go and do that? How powerless and pathetic must a person be to lower themselves to a point where they have to say and act out these types of fantasies about a public figure that they've never met and they know nothing about? I don't know. I never had that problem. I never felt the need to do that. I guess it's the case that they just have low self-esteem themselves, and they need to destroy things in order to make themselves feel better, or maybe make themselves feel like they have control or they can do something. But it's a cesspit of lies. You know, I just did a video earlier today where I talked about social media and the sharing of information, and that's an example of unverified and anonymous. So it lives in the little red box, you know, and who cares about what people say? It has no impact on me. You know, this is where I disagree with Jordan Peterson. he says, oh, well, that has a psychological impact whether you try to take it seriously or not. Why do I care? My life is great, and I know who I am. I'm incredibly comfortable in my own skin. And, if you go ahead and post a tweet I had in Vietnam 2-3 years ago about MetaMask, you honestly think that's going to bother me? No, it has no impact. It just shows you how small you are. But it is what it is, and it's certainly not the only medium that brutally criticizes people. Some more public mediums that are a little bit more connected to real life identity are like cryptocurrency Reddit, for example. Long time they hated Cardano and everything we stand for. And the Bitcoin maximalists, actually, I think, are far worse. Those ones do bother me a little bit, especially maximalists I knew and had relationships with, and in some cases took out to dinner. And, you'd see and you'd actually be quite cordial, like Tone Vase or Max Kaiser and these others. And I understand their shtick, and I understand it's all for marketing and it's just theater and entertainment. But I guess I'm just more of a traditionalist. I don't live in a world where a person you've known for 8 years who's broken major things on your show, you suddenly compare to Jeffrey Epstein because I took PPP money for one of my companies that employs U.S. personnel. I just don't see how that equivocates and how you can do that to a person that you spent numerous occasions in Aspen and London and other places having dinner with, you and your wife, in a very cordial setting, and you know who this person is, to just turn on them in a fly for $1. And when people do that, that does hurt, and it deeply disturbs, because you say, wow, how people's values are so screwed up that they are willing to divorce themselves from the things that are most valuable, relationships and people and experiences, for things that are the least valuable, money and power. And that kind of makes me sad. So those are the things that bother me, not slash biz. It is what it is. It's the dark side of the internet. People say and do horrible things. And they're going to say and do horrible things, and good riddance. Let them go build something. How do all those fucking QAnon conspiracies work out for you guys? Is the storm still coming? Is it coming? I'm waiting for it. QFS conspiracy, I was waiting for that. Or the 70 other things. How's Pizzagate working out for you guys, huh? Is it coming? Yeah, just children. The maximalists are worse. Are you concerned of ever being deplatformed? I very well could be, in which case I'd have to return to my life of the soil, growing mushrooms and wheat and hay and taking care of my animals and just living life. Life is ephemeral. All things are ephemeral. Getting pushed out of Ethereum was one of the best things ever to happen to me, because it taught me that no matter how much you love something or how passionate you are about something, at some point your time is up and you have to go do something else. Imagine being a famous quarterback, and then suddenly you get hit in the knee with a helmet and it destroys your knee, and then you realize you're just done. You can never play again. Okay, you could have been the best, could have went to the Super Bowl. Now it's over. What do you do the morning after? What's your life now? You have to have a mentality that you enjoy being in the saddle when you're there, and you live in the moment and you do your best. But when the time comes to go, it goes. And if I get deplatformed to an extent that I no longer have a public voice, well, then maybe I'll write. But I'm still going to live my life and enjoy my life. And I'm not going to be concerned about arbitrary things that could happen in the future. You can live everything perfectly. You can get straight A's and be a 4.0 kid, please the parents, marry the woman they tell you to marry, become a doctor, do all the things. And then wake up the morning after and discover you have brain cancer. How about that? What would you do? What would all those accomplishments mean if you sacrifice so much that you put life on hold specifically for them, thinking that somehow there would be this glorious future you were building your way up to? It's not the destination, it's the journey you go on as you live your life, regardless of the destination. If every moment isn't worth living, then you're not living in general. And there will never be a day you wake up that somehow it all makes sense. It has to make sense today. And if it doesn't, change the way you're living. How are you going to stop Twitter and those big tech companies from censorship? I did a video on it. Watch my videos on curated social networks. That's just the first of many. This might not be a technical question kind of night, huh? You can ask me technical questions, Tom. What do you got for me? Do you think that we should moderate use of targeted psychological manipulation? That's called marketing. It's just when the government does it, it's called psyops. It just depends on the place and purpose. What's going on with that graphene battery you received and toyed around with? Still have it. It's a power bank. I can't really do much with it outside of recharge my phone, but I switched over to a different one because it's slightly more convenient and has built-in cords. I mostly got it just to say I had a graphene battery because I remember reading about it way back when I took inorganic chemistry so many years ago. And I said, wow, it's so cool to have a substance like this. And to have it in a battery just gave me awe. One more good question. Then I'm going to get some sleep. Mm-hmm. Charles, do you have a desire to go to space? I'm actually going in 2025. How about that? It's on my bucket list, and there's an opportunity to do it, and that's when it's going to open up. And there you go. Is there a meaning to life? Thus is the question every philosopher has ever asked themselves, to an unsatisfying answer other than live well, be well, and treat others well. Good night, everybody. This was fun.